There are moments in life when we believe we have found someone who truly understands us, someone who will hold our deepest truths with care and respect. But what happens when that trust is shattered? When the words we whispered in confidence become public currency? This is the story of a woman who discovered that her most vulnerable secret had been passed from mouth to mouth, and how she found the strength to reclaim her dignity in the face of betrayal. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are listening to this story from. Your support means the world to us. I remember the exact moment I felt it. That strange, prickly sensation that crawls up your spine when you know something is wrong, but you cannot quite place it. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October, and I was standing in the break room at work, pouring myself a cup of coffee. The office was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every small sound seem amplified. I heard the soft click of heels approaching behind me, and when I turned around, I saw two colleagues from the accounting department standing near the door. They were whispering to each other, their heads close together, and when they noticed me looking, they stopped abruptly. Their faces shifted into forced smiles, and one of them gave me a quick nod before they both hurried away. I stood there, holding my coffee cup, feeling a strange knot forming in my stomach. It was not the first time I had noticed something like this. Over the past few weeks, there had been other moments, small, almost imperceptible shifts in the way people looked at me, spoke to me, or fell silent when I entered a room. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. I was tired, stressed from work, and perhaps too sensitive. But as the days passed, the feeling grew stronger. I could not shake the sense that people knew something about me, something I had not shared with them. My name is Rebecca, and I am 35 years old. I work as a project manager for a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Seattle. I have been with the company for nearly 8 years, and I have always prided myself on being professional, reliable, and well-liked. My life is not particularly extraordinary. I have a small apartment in Capitol Hill, a routine that revolves around work and quiet evenings at home, and a close circle of friends I can count on one hand. Or at least, I thought I could count on them. The person I trusted most in the world was my friend, Laura. We met 5 years ago at a professional networking event, and we clicked instantly. She was warm, funny, and easy to talk to. Over the years, our friendship deepened. We met for coffee every Sunday morning, shared our frustrations about work, laughed about our dating disasters, and supported each other through difficult times. Laura was the kind of friend who remembered the small details, who asked how you were doing and actually waited for an answer. I thought she was my safe place. 3 months ago, I told Laura something I had never told anyone else. We were sitting in her living room on a rainy Sunday afternoon, drinking tea and talking about life. I had been feeling particularly vulnerable that day. I had just received some difficult news from my doctor. After years of trying to understand why I felt so exhausted all the time, I was finally diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. It was not life-threatening, but it was chronic, and it explained so much about the fatigue, the joint pain, and the constant feeling that my body was working against me. I had been terrified to tell anyone, afraid of being judged, pitied, or seen as weak. But with Laura, I felt safe. I told her everything. I told her about my diagnosis, my fears, my anger at my own body, and my worry that this would change how people saw me at work. I told her I did not want anyone to know because I did not want to be treated differently. Laura listened. She held my hand. She told me she understood, that my secret was safe with her, and that she would never betray my trust. I believed her. I left her apartment that day feeling lighter, as if sharing the burden had made it easier to carry. But now, standing in that break room, I wondered if I had been wrong to trust her. The next day, I was in a meeting with my team when I noticed it again. We were discussing the upcoming campaign for a new client, and I was presenting the project timeline when I caught one of my team members, a young woman named Jessica, exchanging a quick glance with another colleague. It was a look I had seen before, a look that said they knew something I did not know they knew. When the meeting ended, Jessica lingered behind, and as I gathered my notes, she approached me with a hesitant smile. She said, "Rebecca, I just wanted to say that if you ever need to take a break or adjust your workload, we all understand. You should not push yourself too hard. I froze. My heart began to race. I asked her what she meant, and she looked uncomfortable, as if she had said something she was not supposed to say. She stammered something about how everyone gets tired sometimes and then quickly left the room. I stood there alone, my hands shaking. How did she know? I had not told anyone at work about my condition. I had been careful to keep it private. The only person who knew was Laura. That evening, I called Laura. I needed to hear her voice, to reassure myself that I was imagining things. She answered on the third ring, her tone cheerful and casual. We talked about our day, and I tried to bring up the strange comment Jessica had made. I asked Laura if she had mentioned anything to anyone, trying to keep my voice light, not wanting to accuse her outright. Laura laughed and said she would never do that. She reminded me that I could trust her completely. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, but the doubt had already taken root. Over the following days, the signs became impossible to ignore. I overheard a conversation in the hallway between two people from a different department. They were talking about someone who was dealing with health issues, and one of them said it was important to be understanding, because you never know what someone is going through. When they saw me approaching, they stopped talking and smiled at me with that same pitying look I had seen before. I felt a cold wave of humiliation wash over me. They were talking about me. They knew. I started paying closer attention to the way people interacted with me, the subtle changes in tone, the careful choice of words, the way they seemed to avoid certain topics. It was as if everyone was walking on eggshells around me, trying not to mention anything that might upset me. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and angry. I had not chosen to share my diagnosis with these people, and yet they all seemed to know. The only way they could have found out was through Laura, but I still did not want to believe it. Laura was my closest friend. We had shared so much over the years. I could not imagine her betraying me like this. So I decided to test my theory. I told Laura another secret, something small but specific. I mentioned that I was considering applying for a new position within the company, a senior management role that would require me to relocate to the Portland office. I told her I was not sure if I should pursue it because I was worried about leaving Seattle and starting over. I asked her to keep it between us because I did not want people at work to know I was thinking about leaving. Laura promised she would not say a word. 2 days later, my boss called me into his office. He said he had heard through the grapevine that I might be looking at opportunities in other offices, and he wanted to talk to me about my long-term plans with the company. My stomach dropped. I asked him where he had heard that, and he said someone had mentioned it in passing, though he could not remember who. I left his office feeling numb. There was no longer any doubt. Laura had told someone, and that someone had told someone else. My private thoughts, my fears, my plans, had all become public knowledge. I felt a deep, burning anger rising inside me. But beneath, it was something even more painful. Betrayal. The person I had trusted most in the world had taken my vulnerability and turned it into gossip. I did not understand why. What did she gain from this? Did she enjoy knowing things about me that others did not? Did she feel important when she shared my secrets? Or did she simply not care about the consequences of her actions? That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my phone. I wanted to call Laura and confront her, but I was afraid of what she would say, afraid that she would deny it, afraid that I would lose the one friend I thought I had. But I knew I could not keep living like this, feeling exposed and humiliated every day. I needed answers. I needed to know the truth. The next morning, I woke up with a new resolve. I was not going to let this destroy me. I was not going to hide or pretend. Everything was fine. I deserved to know what had happened, and I deserved to reclaim my dignity. I picked up my phone and sent Laura a message. I told her we needed to talk, and that it was important. She responded within minutes, suggesting we meet for coffee that afternoon at our usual spot. As I prepared to meet her, I felt a strange mix of emotions: fear, anger, sadness, and a deep sense of loss. I knew that whatever happened in that conversation, our friendship would never be the same. But I also knew that I could not move forward without confronting the truth. I had been carrying this weight for too long, and it was time to set it down. I arrived at the coffee shop early and sat by the window, watching people walk by on the street. The autumn rain had started again, and the sky was a dull gray. When Laura walked in, she looked the same as always, smiling, confident, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. She sat down across from me, ordered her usual latte, and started talking about her week. I let her talk for a few minutes, trying to find the right words. And then, when there was a pause, I looked her in the eyes and said the words I had been rehearsing all morning. I said, "Laura, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you tell anyone about my diagnosis?" The moment I asked the question, I saw something flicker across Laura's face. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a flash of surprise, followed by something that looked like guilt. She set down her coffee cup carefully, as if buying herself time to think, and then she looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. She said, "Rebecca, what are you talking about? Of course I did not tell anyone. You asked me to keep it private, and I did. Why would you even think that?" Her voice was calm, convincing even, but I had learned to read the small signs, the way her fingers tapped nervously against the table, the way she avoided holding my gaze for too long, the slight defensiveness in her tone. I had known Laura for 5 years, and I knew when she was lying, but I did not want to believe it. I wanted her to give me a reason to trust her again, to explain away all the strange coincidences and uncomfortable moments. I took a deep breath and said, "Because people at work know, Laura. People who should not know anything about my personal health are making comments, giving me sympathetic looks, and treating me differently. The only person I told was you, so either you told someone, or there is some other explanation I am not seeing." Laura shook her head quickly, her expression shifting to one of concern. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. She said, "Rebecca, I swear to you, I never told anyone. Maybe someone overheard us talking, or maybe people are just being nice because they can sense you have been stressed lately. You know how people are. They pick up on things." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to accept her explanation and go back to the way things were. But I could not ignore the evidence. I pulled my hand away gently and said, "I told you something else a few days ago. Something very specific. I said I was thinking about applying for a position in Portland. 2 days later, my boss called me into his office and asked me about it. How do you explain that?" Laura's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at me with an expression I could not quite read. Then she laughed. It was a short, nervous laugh, and she said, "That is just a coincidence, Rebecca. You are being paranoid. Maybe someone else heard you mention it, or maybe your boss just assumed you might be looking at other opportunities. You are reading too much into this." But I was not reading too much into anything. I was reading exactly what was there. I felt a cold anger settle over me, the kind that makes your voice steady and your thoughts clear. I said, "Laura, I need you to tell me the truth. If you told someone, I need to know. I need to understand why. We have been friends for 5 years. I trusted you with something deeply personal, and now I feel like everyone knows. I deserve honesty." Laura looked away, her jaw tightening. She said, "You are accusing me of betraying you, and I did not do that. Maybe you should think about who else you might have told and forgotten about, or maybe you should consider that you are just feeling insecure right now, because of everything you are going through. I am your friend, Rebecca. I would never hurt you like that." Her words stung, but not because they were true. They stung because she was turning this around on me, making me doubt myself, making me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. I had seen this tactic before in relationships, in friendships, in workplaces. When someone is caught doing something wrong, they deflect, they gaslight, they make the other person question their own perception of reality. I was not going to let her do that to me. I said, "I am not being paranoid, Laura. I am not imagining this, and I am not going to sit here and let you make me feel like I am crazy. I know what I know." Laura stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She said, "Fine. If you want to believe I am some terrible person who goes around sharing your secrets, then go ahead. But I am telling you, I did not do it. And if you cannot trust me, then maybe we should not be friends anymore." She grabbed her purse and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. I sat there alone, watching her disappear into the rain. My hands were shaking, and I felt a hollow ache in my chest. Part of me wanted to run after her, to apologize, to fix things, but the stronger part of me knew that I had done nothing wrong. I had asked for honesty, and she had refused to give it to me. That told me everything I needed to know. I left the coffee shop and walked home slowly, letting the rain soak through my jacket. I felt numb, disconnected from everything around me. When I got back to my apartment, I sat on my couch and stared at the wall, replaying the conversation in my mind. I kept thinking about all the times Laura and I had shared over the years. The late-night phone calls when one of us was feeling down, the trips we had taken together, the inside jokes, the shared memories, the moments when I thought I had found a true friend. Had any of it been real, or had I been blind to who she really was all along? That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about how this had all started, trying to trace back the exact moment when things began to change. It was not just about my diagnosis. There had been other times, smaller moments, when I had told Laura something private, and later noticed it had somehow become public knowledge. I remembered a time 2 years ago when I confided in her about a difficult situation with my mother. My mother had been going through a rough period, struggling with her emotions after my father passed away, and I had been trying to support her while also dealing with my own grief. I told Laura about it one evening, and a few weeks later, another friend mentioned something about my mother in a way that suggested she knew more than she should. At the time, I brushed it off, thinking maybe my mother had told someone herself. But now, looking back, I realized it was a pattern. Laura had always been the kind of person who thrived on being in the know. She loved knowing things before other people did, loved being the one who could share news or offer insights. At first, I thought it was just her personality, her way of connecting with people. But now I saw it differently. She did not just want to know things. She wanted to be important, to be the center of attention, to have power over information. And my secrets had given her that power. The next morning, I woke up feeling exhausted, but also strangely clear-headed. I knew I needed to protect myself. I could not change what had already happened, but I could control what happened next. I decided to stop confiding in Laura completely. I would not give her any more ammunition to use against me. I also decided to be more careful about who I trusted at work. I would keep my personal life separate from my professional life, and I would not assume that anyone was truly safe. But there was still one thing I needed to do. I needed to understand how far the damage had spread. I needed to know who knew what, and where the information had come from. So I started paying closer attention to the conversations around me. I listened to the way people spoke, the things they mentioned, the assumptions they made, and slowly, I began to piece together the trail. It turned out that Laura had not just told one person. She had told her sister, who worked in a different department at my company. Her sister had mentioned it to a colleague during a lunch break, framing it as a way of explaining why I might seem stressed or distant. That colleague had then mentioned it to someone else, and so on. Within a few weeks, my private health information had spread through the office like wildfire, passed from person to person as casual gossip. No one meant any harm, of course. They were all just trying to be understanding, to be kind. But the result was the same. My privacy had been violated, and I was left feeling exposed and humiliated. When I confronted Laura's sister one afternoon, she looked shocked and apologetic. She said she had no idea it was supposed to be a secret, that Laura had mentioned it so casually that she assumed it was common knowledge. She said she was sorry, and I believed her, but the damage was done, and the person responsible for starting it all was Laura. I stopped answering Laura's calls and messages. At first, she tried to reach out, sending texts asking if I was okay, saying she missed our Sunday coffee dates, acting as if nothing had happened. But I did not respond. I needed space, time, to process everything and figure out how to move forward. After a few weeks, the messages stopped. Laura had gotten the message, but the impact of what she had done did not stop. I found myself second-guessing every friendship, every conversation, every moment of vulnerability. I became guarded, careful, always aware of who might be listening or what might be repeated. It was exhausting, and it made me feel isolated. I had always been a private person, but now I felt like I was living behind a wall, unable to let anyone in. One evening, I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling through old photos on my phone. I came across a picture of Laura and me from a trip we had taken to the San Juan Islands 2 years ago. We were standing on a beach, smiling, the wind blowing through our hair. I looked so happy in that photo, so carefree. I wondered when things had changed, or if they had always been this way and I had just been too trusting to see it. I thought about my mother during this time. She had always been a strong woman, someone who faced challenges head-on and did not let setbacks define her. After my father passed away, she had struggled, but she had also rebuilt her life. She had found new friendships, new hobbies, new reasons to keep going. I called her one evening and told her what had happened. Not in great detail, but enough for her to understand. She listened quietly, and when I finished, she said something that stayed with me. She said, "Rebecca, you cannot control what other people do. You can only control how you respond. If someone betrays your trust, it tells you who they are, not who you are. Do not let their actions make you close yourself off from the world. There are good people out there, people who will honor your trust. You just have to be patient and wise about who you let in." Her words gave me some comfort, but I still felt the weight of what had happened. I had been betrayed by someone I considered my closest friend, and it had shaken my faith in people. I did not know if I would ever be able to trust someone that deeply again, but as the days passed, I also felt something else growing inside me, a quiet determination. I was not going to let this define me. I was not going to let Laura's betrayal turn me into someone bitter and closed off. I was going to find a way to move forward, to rebuild my sense of self, and to protect my dignity. I did not know how yet, but I knew I would figure it out. One afternoon, I was walking through the office when I ran into Jessica, the colleague who had made the comment about taking a break. She stopped me in the hallway and said she wanted to apologize. She said she had heard things through the office gossip chain, and she realized now that it was not her place to say anything. She said she admired the way I had been handling everything with such grace, and she hoped I knew that people were not judging me. They were just concerned. Her words were kind, and I appreciated them, but they also reminded me of how out of control the situation had become. My private life was no longer private, and there was nothing I could do to change that. The only thing I could do was decide how I was going to carry myself moving forward. That evening, I made a decision. I was going to focus on rebuilding my life on my own terms. I was going to set boundaries, protect my privacy, and be more intentional about the people I allowed into my inner circle. I was not going to waste my energy being angry at Laura or dwelling on what she had done. She had shown me who she was, and I had learned a valuable lesson. Now it was time to move on. But even as I made that decision, I knew there was still unfinished business. Laura had taken something from me, and I needed to reclaim it. I needed to confront her one more time, not to get an apology or an explanation, but to tell her exactly what she had done and how it had affected me. I needed to say my piece, for my own sake, so I could close this chapter and move forward. I decided I would do it soon. I would face her, speak my truth, and then walk away for good. It took me 2 weeks to find the courage to reach out to Laura again. 2 weeks of sleepless nights, of rehearsing what I would say, of imagining every possible response she might give. Part of me hoped she would reach out first, that she would call me and apologize, that she would admit what she had done and beg for forgiveness, but she never did. The silence between us grew heavier with each passing day, and I realized that if I wanted closure, I would have to take the first step. I sent her a text message on a Thursday evening. It was simple and direct. I said I wanted to meet with her one last time to talk about what had happened. I told her I was not looking for an argument or a confrontation, but I needed to say some things that had been weighing on me. I asked if she would be willing to meet me at the park near Green Lake on Saturday afternoon. It was a public place, neutral territory, somewhere I could feel safe and in control. She responded an hour later. She said she would be there. That Saturday morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I put on comfortable clothes, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window, watching the clouds move slowly across the sky. Seattle was experiencing one of those rare November days when the sun actually broke through the gray, and the air felt crisp and clear. I took it as a good sign, a reminder that even in the midst of darkness, there could be moments of light. I arrived at the park 15 minutes early and sat on a bench overlooking the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the trees and the sky like a mirror. There were people jogging along the path, families with children feeding the ducks, and an older couple sitting on a nearby bench holding hands. Life was going on around me, ordinary and peaceful, and it made me feel both comforted and deeply alone. When Laura arrived, she looked different, smaller somehow, less confident than I remembered. She was wearing a gray sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She saw me and hesitated for a moment before walking over and sitting down on the other end of the bench, leaving a careful distance between us. She said, "Thank you for reaching out. I have been thinking about you a lot." I nodded but did not say anything right away. I wanted to choose my words carefully, to make sure I said exactly what I needed to say without letting my emotions take over. I took a deep breath and turned to look at her. I said, "Laura, I have spent the last few weeks trying to make sense of what happened between us. I have replayed our friendship over and over in my mind, trying to figure out where things went wrong, and I realized something. This was not just about one mistake or one moment of poor judgment. This was a pattern. You have been sharing my private information with other people for a long time, and I was too trusting to see it." Laura opened her mouth to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I said, "Please, let me finish. I need to say this." She closed her mouth and looked down at her hands. I continued. I said, "When I told you about my diagnosis, I was at one of the most vulnerable points in my life. I was scared, confused, and ashamed. I trusted you because I thought you were my closest friend. I thought you would protect me the way I have always tried to protect you. But instead, you took that information and shared it with your sister, who shared it with her colleagues. And within weeks, my entire office knew something I never intended for them to know. Do you have any idea how that feels? To walk into work every day and see people looking at you with pity? To know that strangers are discussing your health and your personal struggles behind your back?" Laura's eyes were beginning to fill with tears, but I could not stop. I had held this in for too long. I said, "And it was not just my diagnosis. I have been thinking about other times when I confided in you, and later found out that people knew things they should not have known. Like when I told you about my mother's struggles after my father passed away. Like when I mentioned I was having trouble with a colleague at work. Like when I shared my fears about my future and my career. Every time I opened up to you, you turned it into something to share with someone else. And I do not understand why. What did you get out of it? Did it make you feel important? Did it give you something to talk about with other people?" Laura finally looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. She said, "Rebecca, I am so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I swear I did not realize what I was doing. When you told me things, I just thought I was sharing with people who cared about you. I thought I was helping, making sure you had support." I shook my head. I said, "Laura, you do not share someone's private medical information without their permission. You do not tell people about their personal struggles without asking first. That is not support. That is gossip. And deep down, I think you know that. You knew I asked you to keep it private. You knew I did. Not want people at work to know. But you told your sister anyway. And you did not think about the consequences." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and said, "You are right. I did know. And I did it anyway. I do not have a good excuse. I guess I just liked being the person who knew things, who could help people understand what was going on. But I never thought about how it would make you feel. I was selfish, and I am so sorry." Her apology felt genuine, but it also felt incomplete. I knew that saying sorry was easy, changing behavior was much harder. I said, "Laura, I appreciate your apology, but I do not think I can trust you again. Trust is not something you can just repair with words. It takes time, consistency, and proof that someone has changed. And honestly, I do not know if I have the energy to rebuild this friendship. You hurt me deeply, and I need to protect myself." Laura nodded slowly, her shoulders sagging. She said, "I understand. I do not blame you. If I were in your position, I would probably feel the same way. I just want you to know that I really did value our friendship, and I am going to think about what you said. I need to do better." We sat in silence for a few moments, watching the ducks glide across the water. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had, said what I needed to say, but it did not make the pain go away. It just made it more real, more final. I said, "I hope you do learn from this, Laura. I hope you realize that people's trust is a gift, and it should not be taken lightly. I am going to move forward with my life, and I am going to be more careful about who I let in. But I want you to know that I do not hate you. I am just disappointed." Laura nodded again, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. She said, "I am disappointed in myself too." We sat there for a few more minutes, and then I stood up. I said, "I think this is goodbye, Laura. I wish you well, but I need to take care of myself now." She looked up at me and said, "Goodbye, Rebecca. I really am sorry." I turned and walked away, my legs feeling heavy but my heart feeling slightly lighter. I had done what I needed to do. I had spoken my truth, and I had set a boundary. Now it was time to focus on healing. The days following that conversation were difficult. I found myself feeling angry at unexpected moments, grieving the loss of a friendship that had once meant so much to me. I also felt a deep sense of loneliness. Laura had been such a big part of my life, and without her, there was a void. I tried to fill it by spending more time with other friends, by focusing on work, by keeping myself busy. But the emptiness was still there. One evening, I was sitting at my desk at home, going through some old emails, when I came across a message from a former colleague named Rachel. Rachel and I had worked together a few years ago before she moved to a different company. We had always gotten along well, but we had not kept in close touch. Her email was from several months ago, just checking in to see how I was doing, and suggesting we meet for lunch sometime. I had read it when it first arrived, but I had been so busy that I never responded. On a whim, I decided to write back. I told her I would love to catch up and asked if she was available the following week. She responded the next morning, enthusiastic and warm, and we made plans to meet at a small restaurant downtown. When I saw Rachel again, I was struck by how genuinely happy she seemed to see me. We spent 2 hours talking, laughing, and sharing stories about our lives. I did not tell her everything that had happened with Laura, but I did mention that I had recently gone through a difficult time with a friend. Rachel listened without judgment, and then she said something that surprised me. She said, "You know, Rebecca, I have been through something similar. I had a close friend who I thought I could trust with anything. And she ended up sharing something very personal about me with a group of mutual friends. It was devastating. I felt so betrayed and so exposed. But eventually, I realized that her actions said more about her than they did about me. I learned to be more careful about who I trust, but I also learned not to close myself off completely. There are good people out there. You just have to find them." Her words resonated with me. I realized that I was not alone in this experience, that betrayal and broken trust were things many people dealt with. It did not make the pain go away, but it did make me feel less isolated. Over the next few weeks, I started to rebuild my social life. I reconnected with old friends, joined a yoga class, and started attending a book club that met once a month. I also made a conscious effort to be more open with people, but in a careful, measured way. I did not share everything with everyone, but I did allow myself to be vulnerable with people who had earned my trust over time. At work, things slowly began to improve. The awkward looks and pitying comments faded as people moved on to other topics of conversation. I focused on my projects, took on new responsibilities, and proved to myself and others that I was capable and strong. My boss even approached me about the Portland position again, and this time, I told him I was not interested. I had decided that I wanted to stay in Seattle, to rebuild my life here, and to prove to myself that I could thrive despite everything that had happened. But even as things improved, there was still a part of me that felt broken. I had lost something important, and I did not know if I would ever fully get it back. I missed the feeling of having a best friend, someone I could call at any time, someone who knew me inside and out. I missed the easy intimacy of our Sunday morning coffee dates and the comfort of knowing someone was always in my corner. One night, I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, when I received a text message. It was from an unknown number. The message said, "Hi, Rebecca. This is Laura's sister, Emily. I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to reach out to you. I have been thinking a lot about what happened, and I feel terrible about my role in it. I know I cannot undo the damage, but I wanted you to know that I am truly sorry. I also wanted to tell you that Laura has been struggling a lot since you two stopped speaking. She has been seeing a therapist and working on herself. I am not asking you to forgive her or to be her friend again. I just thought you should know that she is taking this seriously and trying to change. I hope you are doing well. I stared at the message for a long time, not sure how to feel. Part of me was glad to hear that Laura was taking responsibility and working on herself, but another part of me felt angry that Emily was reaching out, as if she was trying to absolve herself or Laura of guilt. I did not respond to the message. I simply turned off my phone and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to find that my world had shifted in a way I did not expect. I received an email from a woman named Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a psychologist who specialized in workplace dynamics and interpersonal relationships. She said she had heard about my situation through a mutual contact and wanted to offer me a free consultation. She said she often worked with people who had experienced betrayal or broken trust, and she thought she might be able to help me process what I had been through. I was skeptical at first, but I decided to take her up on the offer. We met the following week at her office, a cozy space filled with books and comfortable chairs. Dr. Mitchell was warm and professional, and she made me feel safe from the moment I walked in. I told her everything. I told her about Laura, about the betrayal, about the way it had affected my work and my relationships. I told her about my fears, my anger, and in my struggle to trust people again. Dr. Mitchell listened carefully, and then she said something that changed my perspective. She said, "Rebecca, what happened to you was a violation of trust, and it is completely understandable that you are feeling hurt and guarded. But I want you to remember that not everyone is like Laura. Most people do respect boundaries and honor trust. The key is learning to recognize the signs early on, to set clear boundaries, and to trust your instincts. You are stronger than you realize, and you have the power to rebuild your life in a way that feels safe and authentic to you." Her words gave me hope. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could see a path forward. I continued to meet with Dr. Mitchell over the next few months, working through my feelings and learning how to rebuild my sense of trust. It was not easy, and there were many setbacks along the way, but slowly, I began to feel more like myself again. And then, one day, everything changed. I was at work, reviewing a report, when I received a phone call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. On the other end of the line was a woman who introduced herself as Jennifer Lawson, a journalist for a local news outlet. She said she was working on a story about workplace privacy and gossip culture, and she had heard about my situation. She said she wanted to interview me, to hear my story, and to shine a light on the issue. At first, I was terrified. The thought of making my experience public, of opening myself up to judgment and scrutiny, was overwhelming. But then I thought about all the other people out there who had experienced similar betrayals, who felt alone and ashamed. I thought about how much it had helped me to talk to Rachel and Dr. Mitchell, to know that I was not the only one. And I realized that sharing my story might help others feel less alone. I agreed to the interview. The day of the interview, I woke up with a strange mixture of nervousness and calm. I had spent the previous evening going over what I wanted to say, practicing in front of the mirror, making sure I could tell my story without breaking down. I wanted to be strong, composed, and clear. This was not about revenge or public humiliation. This was about raising awareness, about helping other people understand the real consequences of gossip and broken trust. Jennifer Lawson met me at a quiet cafe near Pike Place Market. She was younger than I expected, probably in her early 30s, with kind eyes and a notebook already open on the table. She ordered us both coffee and started by explaining the scope of her article. She said she had been researching workplace culture and the way personal information spreads in professional environments. She had interviewed HR professionals, psychologists, and several people who had experienced similar situations to mine. She wanted to include my story because it was a clear example of how trust violations can affect someone's mental health, career, and sense of safety. I took a deep breath and began to tell her everything. I explained how I had confided in Laura about my diagnosis, how I had specifically asked her to keep it private, and how within weeks, my entire office seemed to know. I told her about the pitying looks, the careful comments, the way people started treating me differently. I explained how I had tested my theory by sharing another piece of information with Laura, only to have it confirmed that she was the source of the leak. I described the confrontation, the pain of losing someone I considered my closest friend, and the long process of rebuilding my sense of trust. Jennifer listened intently, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. She asked me how it had affected my work performance, my relationships with colleagues, and my overall mental health. I told her honestly that it had been one of the hardest periods of my life, but that I was working through it with the help of a therapist and a renewed focus on setting boundaries. When I finished, Jennifer looked at me with genuine empathy. She said, "Rebecca, I want to thank you for being willing to share this. I know it cannot be easy to talk about something so personal, but I think your story is going to resonate with a lot of people. I have heard variations of this same story over and over again in my research. People trust someone with private information, and that person shares it without thinking about the consequences. It happens in workplaces, in families, in friendships, and the damage it causes is real and lasting." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I said, "I just want people to understand that gossip is not harmless. When you share someone's private information without their permission, you are taking away their agency, their dignity, and their right to control their own narrative. And once that information is out there, you cannot take it back." Jennifer closed her notebook and said she would send me a draft of the article before it was published, to make sure I was comfortable with how my story was presented. I appreciated that. I wanted to make sure my words were represented accurately, and that the focus stayed on the broader issue, not just on my personal drama with Laura. The article was published 2 weeks later. It was titled, "When Trust Becomes Public Currency: The Hidden Cost of Workplace Gossip." My story was featured prominently, though Jennifer had changed some identifying details to protect my privacy. She included quotes from psychologists explaining the psychological impact of trust violations, and she highlighted statistics about how common this type of betrayal is in professional settings. The article ended with a call to action, encouraging readers to think carefully about the information they share and to respect the privacy of others. The response was overwhelming. Within hours of the article going live, my inbox was flooded with messages from people thanking me for speaking out. Some were colleagues who had experienced similar situations. Others were strangers who had read the article and felt seen and validated. One woman wrote to tell me that her best friend had shared details about her personal struggles with depression, and that it had nearly cost her a promotion at work. Another person told me about a family member who had spread information about their financial difficulties, leading to embarrassment and strained relationships. The stories poured in, each one a reminder that I was not alone in this experience. But along with the supportive messages came some uncomfortable attention. A few people at work approached me, some apologizing for their role in spreading the information, others simply expressing their support. One colleague, a man named David, who worked in the finance department, stopped me in the hallway and said he had read the article and wanted to apologize. He said he had been one of the people who heard about my diagnosis through the office grapevine, and he had made a comment to someone else about it without thinking. He said he never meant any harm, but he realized now that even well-intentioned gossip could be hurtful. I appreciated his apology, and I told him so. I said, "David, I do not think anyone set out to hurt me, but that is exactly the problem. People do not realize the impact of their words until it is too late. I am glad you're thinking about it now." He nodded and said he would be more careful in the future, but not everyone was supportive. A few days after the article came out, I received an anonymous email. It was short and cutting. It said, "You are making a big deal out of nothing. People talk. That is what they do. If you did not want anyone to know about your health, you should not have told anyone at all. Stop playing the victim." I read the email twice, feeling a familiar anger rising in my chest. But then I took a deep breath and deleted it. I was not going to let someone's cruel words undo the progress I had made. I knew the truth. I knew that I had every right to confide in a friend and expect that confidence to be respected. And I knew that sharing my story had already helped other people feel less alone. That was what mattered. What I did not expect was the silence from Laura. I had assumed that once the article came out, she would reach out, either to apologize again or to defend herself, but she did not. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing from her. I did not know if she had read the article, or if she was angry, embarrassed, or indifferent. Part of me wanted to know what she was thinking, but a bigger part of me realized that it did not matter anymore. I had said what I needed to say, and I had moved on. Then, about 3 weeks after the article was published, something unexpected happened. I was working late at the office, finishing up a presentation for a client meeting the next day, when I heard a knock on my door. I looked up and saw Laura standing in the doorway. My heart jumped into my throat. She looked nervous, her hands clutched around a small paper bag. She said, "Hi, Rebecca. I am sorry to show up like this. I know you probably do not want to see me, but I needed to talk to you, and I was afraid if I called or texted, you would not respond." I stared at her for a long moment, not sure what to say. Finally, I gestured to the chair across from my desk. I said, "Come in." She walked in slowly and sat down, placing the paper bag on the edge of my desk. She said, "I brought you something. It is just coffee and a croissant from that bakery you like. I know it does not fix anything, but I wanted to bring something." I looked at the bag but did not touch it. I said, "Laura, what are you doing here?" She took a deep breath and said, "I read the article. I read it the day it came out, and I have read it probably 10 times since then. And I have been doing a lot of thinking. I have been seeing a therapist, like my sister probably told you, and we have been talking about my behavior, about why I do the things I do. And I realized something. I realized that I have spent most of my life trying to be important, trying to be the person people come to for information, for help, for support. I thought that made me valuable. But what I did not realize was that I was using other people's pain and vulnerability to make myself feel needed. I was not being a good friend. I was being selfish. And I hurt you in the process." Her words hung in the air between us. I could see that she was genuinely struggling, that she was trying to take responsibility. But I also knew that words were not enough. I said, "Laura, I appreciate you coming here and saying this. I really do. But I need you to understand something. What you did not just hurt me emotionally. It affected my professional life, my relationships, my sense of safety. I spent weeks feeling exposed and humiliated. I had to rebuild my trust in people from the ground up. And even now, I am still dealing with the consequences." Laura nodded, tears forming in her eyes. She said, "I know, and I cannot undo what I did. I cannot take back the pain I caused. But I wanted you to know that I am working on myself. I am learning to recognize when I am about to cross a boundary, and I am learning to stop myself. I am not asking for your forgiveness or for us to be friends again. I just wanted you to know that I heard you, and I am trying to be better." I looked at her for a long moment, trying to decide how I felt. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her another chance, but the bigger part of me knew that I needed to protect myself. I said, "Laura, I am glad you are working on yourself. I really am. But I do not think I am ready to let you back into my life. Maybe someday, but not now. I need to focus on my own healing." She nodded, wiping her eyes. She said, "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry, and that I am going to keep working on being a better person." She stood up and walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. She said, "For what it is worth, I am proud of you for speaking out. What you did took courage, and I think it is going to help a lot of people." I nodded but did not say anything. She left, closing the door softly behind her. I sat there alone, staring at the paper bag on my desk. After a few minutes, I opened it and took out the coffee. It was still warm. I took a sip and let myself feel the complicated mix of emotions swirling inside me. I felt sad, relieved, angry, and strangely at peace all at once. Over the next few weeks, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The attention from the article faded, and I was able to focus on my work and my personal growth. I continued seeing Dr. Mitchell, and I continued building new friendships with people who respected my boundaries. I also started volunteering with a local organization that supported people dealing with chronic health conditions. It felt good to channel my experience into something positive, to help others navigate the challenges I had faced. One evening, I was at a volunteer event when I met a woman named Claire. She was about my age, and she had recently been diagnosed with the same autoimmune condition I had. We started talking, and I found myself opening up to her in a way I had not been able to with anyone in a long time. She listened without judgment, and she shared her own struggles and fears. By the end of the evening, we exchanged phone numbers and agreed to meet for coffee the following week. As I walked home that night, I realized something important. I had survived one of the hardest experiences of my life, and I had come out stronger on the other side. I had learned to set boundaries, to protect my privacy, and to recognize the people who truly deserved my trust. I had also learned that vulnerability was not weakness. It was courage, and I was not going to let one person's betrayal stop me from being open and authentic with the people who earned it. But I also knew that my story was not over yet. There was still one more chapter to write, one more step to take, and it would require me to confront the lingering pain and anger I still carried, to find a way to truly let go and move forward. I did not know exactly how I would do it, but I knew I was ready to try. 6 months had passed since the article was published, and my life had transformed in ways I never expected. The initial storm of attention had settled, but the impact of sharing my story continued to ripple outward. I received occasional messages from people who had read the article and found comfort in knowing they were not alone in their experiences. Some reached out for advice, others simply to say thank you. Each message reminded me that speaking my truth had been the right decision, even when it felt terrifying. My friendship with Claire had blossomed into something genuine and supportive. We met regularly for coffee, attended support groups together, and shared the ups and downs of managing our health conditions. With Claire, I felt safe being vulnerable. She never repeated what I told her, never made me feel judged, and always respected my boundaries. It was the kind of friendship I thought I had with Laura, but this time it was real. At work, I had been promoted to senior project manager, a position that came with more responsibility and recognition. My boss told me during the promotion meeting that my resilience and professionalism over the past year had not gone unnoticed. He said I had handled a difficult situation with grace and had emerged as a stronger leader because of it. The promotion felt like validation, proof that I had not let the betrayal define me or limit my potential. But despite all the positive changes, there was still something unresolved inside me. I had forgiven myself for trusting Laura. I had set new boundaries and rebuilt my confidence. I had even found compassion for Laura's struggles and her attempts to change, but I had not fully let go of the anger and hurt that still lived somewhere deep in my chest. It was like a weight I carried with me, invisible to others, but always present. Dr. Mitchell had been helping me work through these feelings. During one of our sessions, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. She said, "Rebecca, what would it take for you to feel truly free from this experience? What would closure look like for you?" I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I said, "I think I need to stop waiting for Laura to give me something she cannot give. I have been holding on to this idea that if she just understood the full extent of what she did, if she just apologized in the right way, then I would feel better. But the truth is, no apology will ever undo what happened. I need to find closure within myself, not from her." Dr. Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. She said, "That is a powerful realization. Closure is not something someone else gives you. It is something you create for yourself. And it sounds like you are ready to do that." She suggested I write a letter to Laura, not to send, but as a way of processing my feelings and releasing them. She said that sometimes putting everything down on paper, all the pain, anger, disappointment, and even the gratitude for the lessons learned, could be a powerful tool for healing. I decided to try it. That weekend, I sat down at my kitchen table with a notebook and a pen. I started writing, and once I began, the words poured out. I wrote about the betrayal, about how deeply it had hurt me, about the nights I spent crying and questioning everything I thought I knew about trust and friendship. I wrote about my anger, my disappointment, and my grief for the friendship I had lost. But I also wrote about what I had gained. I wrote about the strength I discovered within myself, the new friendships I had formed, the boundaries I had learned to set, and the person I had become through the struggle. When I finished, the letter was 10 pages long. I read it over once, feeling tears stream down my face, and then I folded it carefully and put it in an envelope. I did not address it to anyone. It was just for me. I placed it in a drawer and felt a small shift inside me. as if something heavy had loosened its grip. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a local women's leadership conference. The organizers had read the article about my experience and wanted me to share my story as part of a panel discussion on workplace integrity and trust. I was nervous about speaking in front of a large audience, but I also felt ready. This was an opportunity to turn my pain into purpose, to help others learn from what I had been through. The day of the conference, I stood backstage, listening to the other panelists share their stories. Each woman spoke about challenges they had faced in their careers, moments of betrayal, discrimination, or self-doubt, and how they had overcome them. When it was my turn, I walked onto the stage, looked out at the audience of more than 200 women, and took a deep breath. I told them my story. I explained what it felt like to have my trust violated, to have my private health information spread, without my consent, and to feel exposed and powerless. But I also told them about the journey that followed. I talked about the importance of setting boundaries, of choosing carefully who we trust, and of not letting one person's actions close us off from meaningful connections. I talked about resilience, about the power of speaking our truth, and about the strength that comes from vulnerability. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment, and then the audience erupted into applause. Several women approached me afterward, some with tears in their eyes, thanking me for my honesty and courage. One woman told me she had been struggling with a similar situation at her workplace and had felt too ashamed to talk about it. She said hearing my story gave her the courage to speak up. Another woman said she realized she had been guilty of sharing information that was not hers to share, and my words had made her rethink her behavior. As I left the conference that day, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. I felt proud of myself, not just for surviving what I had been through, but for choosing to use my experience to help others. I realized that this was my closure, not a conversation with Laura, not an apology, not revenge or vindication. My closure came from taking control of my own narrative and using my voice to create something meaningful. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. My heart sank for a moment, wondering if it was another anonymous critic or someone dredging up the past. But when I opened it, I saw that it was from Laura's sister, Emily. The message said, "Hi, Rebecca. I was at the conference today. I did not know you were speaking, but I am so glad I was there to hear it. What you said was powerful and important. I wanted to let you know that Laura was not there, but I am going to tell her about it. I think she needs to hear how far you have come. I hope you are doing well. You deserve all the good things coming your way." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me appreciated Emily's words, but another part of me did not want Laura to know about the conference or my continued healing. I did not want her to think I was doing any of this for her, or because of her. I was doing it for myself and for the people I could help. But I also realized that I could not control what Emily told Laura, and ultimately, it did not matter. Laura's reaction, or lack thereof, was no longer my concern. I did not respond to Emily's message. Instead, I put my phone down and made myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, and I thought about how far I had come. 6 months ago, I had been broken, humiliated, and unsure if I would ever feel whole again. Now, I was standing on stages, sharing my story, helping others, and building a life that felt authentic and strong. A few days later, I received an envelope in the mail. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Laura. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly. I unfolded it and read. The letter said, "Rebecca, I heard about your speech at the conference. Emily told me what you said, and I have been thinking about it ever since. I know I do not have the right to ask anything of you, and I am not writing this to ask for forgiveness or to try to rebuild our friendship. I am writing because I need you to know something. What you have done, the way you have turned your pain into purpose, is the most courageous thing I have ever seen. You have inspired me to keep working on myself, to keep trying to be better. I am not there yet, but I am trying. I hope you know that you are an incredible person, and I am sorry I did not see that clearly enough when I had the chance. I wish you nothing but peace and happiness. Take care of yourself. Laura." I read the letter 3 times, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was sadness for what we had lost, gratitude for the acknowledgement, and a quiet sense of finality. This was her closure, and mine. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer next to the one I had written, and decided I would not respond. Some chapters needed to end without a final conversation, without tying up every loose thread. This was one of them. Over the next few weeks, I focused on the future. I started working on a blog where I shared thoughts about trust, boundaries, and resilience. I received messages from people all over the country who connected with my words. I also began mentoring younger women at my company, helping them navigate workplace challenges and encouraging them to advocate for themselves. One afternoon, Claire and I were sitting in a park, enjoying the rare Seattle sunshine. She turned to me and said, "You know, Rebecca, I have been thinking about everything you have been through, and I just want to say that I admire you so much. You took something painful and turned it into something beautiful. You are helping so many people, and you are living proof that we can survive betrayal and come out stronger." Her words brought tears to my eyes. I said, "Thank you, Claire. That means more to me than you know." I think the hardest part was realizing that I had to be the one to create my own closure. I could not wait for someone else to make me feel whole again. I had to do it myself. Claire smiled and said, "And you did. You really did." As we sat there, I realized that this was the life I had rebuilt. A life filled with genuine connections, clear boundaries, and a deep sense of self-worth. I had learned that trust was precious, that vulnerability required courage, and that my voice mattered. I had learned that I was stronger than I ever imagined, and that I did not need anyone's permission to move forward. A year had passed since I stood on that conference stage and shared my story with hundreds of women. A year since I received Laura's final letter. A year since I decided to stop waiting for closure from others and create it for myself. And in that year, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined when I was sitting in that coffee shop, heartbroken and betrayed. The blog I started had grown beyond my expectations. What began as a personal outlet for processing my thoughts had become a community. Thousands of people followed my posts, shared their own stories in the comments, and reached out to tell me how my words had helped them navigate their own experiences with betrayal, broken trust, and the difficult journey of healing. I wrote about setting boundaries, about recognizing red flags in relationships, about the importance of choosing vulnerability wisely, and about the strength it takes to rebuild after someone breaks your trust. I also continued speaking at conferences and workshops. Each time I shared my story, I met more people who had experienced similar pain. The response was always the same: gratitude, recognition, and relief that someone was finally talking about something so many people experienced, but rarely discussed openly. One woman told me that after hearing me speak, she finally had the courage to end a toxic friendship that had been draining her for years. Another said my words helped her realize she was not overreacting when she felt betrayed by a colleague who had shared her personal struggles without permission. At work, I had settled comfortably into my role as senior project manager. My team respected me, my projects were successful, and I felt a sense of pride in the work I was doing. But more importantly, I had learned to maintain clear boundaries between my professional and personal life. I was friendly with my colleagues, but I was careful about what I shared and with whom. I had learned that not everyone needed to know everything about me, and that protecting my privacy was not the same as being closed off. My friendship with Claire had become one of the most important relationships in my life. We supported each other through the challenges of managing our health conditions, celebrated each other's successes, and provided a safe space for vulnerability. With Claire, I never had to worry about my words being repeated or my trust being violated. She had proven herself time and time again to be someone who valued privacy, respected boundaries, and understood the sacred nature of true friendship. I had also reconnected with a few other friends from different periods of my life, people I had lost touch with over the years but who reached out after reading my article or hearing about my speaking engagements. These reconnections reminded me that good people existed, that trustworthy friendships were possible, and that my experience with Laura was not a reflection of what all friendships would be. One Saturday morning in late autumn, I was sitting in my favorite cafe, working on a new blog post, when I looked up and saw someone I did not expect. It was Jessica, the colleague who had made that first uncomfortable comment about me needing to take a break. She was standing at the counter, ordering coffee, and when she turned around, our eyes met. She smiled hesitantly and walked over to my table. She said, "Hi, Rebecca. I hope I am not interrupting. I just wanted to say hello." I smiled and gestured to the empty chair across from me. I said, "Not at all. Please, sit down." Jessica sat and looked at me with a mixture of admiration and nervousness. She said, "I have been following your blog. I think what you are doing is amazing, and I wanted to apologize again for that comment I made last year. I did not realize at the time how inappropriate it was, but your writing has really opened my eyes to how much words matter, even when they come from a good place." I appreciated her honesty. I said, "Thank you, Jessica. I know you did not mean any harm. And honestly, your comment was just one small piece of a much bigger problem. But I am glad my writing has resonated with you." She nodded and said, "It really has. I actually ended up having a similar experience a few months ago. A friend shared something private about me, and I felt so violated. Reading your blog helped me understand that what I was feeling was valid, and it gave me the courage to address it with her. We are working through it now, but I am being much more careful about what I share and with whom." Her words reminded me of why I had started writing in the first place. This was the impact I wanted to have. Not just sharing my story, but helping others recognize their own experiences and empowering them to protect themselves and heal. We talked for a while longer, and when Jessica left, I felt a sense of satisfaction. The pain I had experienced had not been wasted. It had been transformed into something meaningful, something that was helping others navigate their own challenges. That afternoon, I went for a walk along the waterfront. The air was crisp and cool, and the sky was a brilliant blue. As I walked, I thought about Laura. I had not heard from her since that final letter, and I did not expect to. I wondered sometimes if she was still working on herself, if she had truly changed, or if she had simply moved on and forgotten about our friendship entirely. But I realized that I did not need to know. Her journey was hers, and mine was mine. We had gone our separate ways, and that was okay. I thought about forgiveness. People often asked me if I had forgiven Laura, and the truth was complicated. I had forgiven her in the sense that I no longer carried active anger or resentment toward her. I had released the bitterness that once consumed me, and I had stopped wishing for her to suffer or pay for what she did. But forgiveness did not mean forgetting, and it did not mean welcoming her back into my life. It meant accepting what had happened, learning from it, and choosing to move forward without letting it define me. As the sun began to set over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had survived one of the most painful experiences of my life, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to my own values. I had learned that trust was precious and should be given carefully. I had learned that my voice mattered and that speaking my truth could create positive change. I had learned that vulnerability was not weakness, but courage. And most importantly, I had learned that I was capable of healing myself, of creating my own closure, and of building a life that felt authentic and fulfilling. A few weeks later, I received an invitation to speak at a national conference on workplace ethics and interpersonal relationships. It was the biggest speaking opportunity I had received, and I was both nervous and excited. The organizers wanted me to give the keynote address, sharing my story and the lessons I had learned. I accepted immediately. The night before the conference, I sat in my hotel room, reviewing my speech. I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment: the pain, the betrayal, the anger, the healing, the growth. I thought about all the people who had supported me along the way: Dr. Mitchell, Claire, my mother, the colleagues who had apologized, and the strangers who had reached out to share their own stories. I thought about how far I had come from that day in the break room when I first felt the prickle of suspicion, when I first realized something was wrong. The next morning, I stood on that stage in front of more than 1,000 people. I looked out at the sea of faces, took a deep breath, and began to speak. I told them my story, from beginning to end. I told them about the trust I had given, the betrayal I had experienced, and the long journey of healing that followed. I told them about the importance of respecting privacy, honoring boundaries, and thinking carefully before sharing information that is not ours to share. I told them about resilience, about finding strength in vulnerability, and about the power of speaking our truth. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood, some wiping tears from their eyes, others nodding in recognition. After the speech, dozens of people approached me, thanking me, sharing their stories, and telling me how my words had impacted them. One woman told me she'd been carrying guilt for years about sharing a friend's secret, and my speech had given her the courage to apologize. Another said she was going to be much more mindful about the information she shared in the future. As I flew home the next day, I looked out the airplane window at the clouds below and felt a profound sense of gratitude. I was grateful for the pain I had experienced because it had taught me so much. I was grateful for the betrayal because it had shown me who I really was and what I was capable of. I was grateful for the journey because it had led me to this place of strength, purpose, and peace. When I arrived home, I found a package waiting for me at my door. Inside was a book, a journal with a beautiful leather cover. Tucked inside was a note from Claire. It said, "For all the stories you have yet to tell, I am so proud of you, my friend. Keep shining." I smiled, feeling tears prick my eyes. I opened the journal to the first blank page, and wrote, "Today, I am grateful. Grateful for the lessons learned, the strength discovered, and the person I have become. This is not the end of my story. It is just the beginning." And it was the beginning of a life lived with intention, with boundaries, with courage, and with the deep knowledge that I was enough, exactly as I was. I had reclaimed my dignity, my voice, and my power, and no one could ever take that away from me again.